All right, let's get started. So hello, everybody. Thanks to everybody for coming. My name is Justin Grote. I'm a Data Center Solutions Architect with Allied Digital. Today we're going to be going through getting Visual Studio Code all optimized for PowerShell. So this is going to be sort of like an unplugged style session. What we're going to do is we're just going to take a fresh copy of VS Code and we're just going to start adding stuff to it from all kinds of recommendations I have, and I'm just going to show you some tips and tricks, things I've picked up from working with Visual Studio Code for about the last 5 or 6 years. I came from ISE, I love ISE, and it was a real hard shift for me to get over to Visual Studio Code, and I'll show a couple quick things about that. But the point is that this is not going to be an intro to Visual Studio Code. I'm not going to really go into any of that. This is more about like once you're there, but I'll provide you some resources for that. So real quick, a quick plug for my company, Allied Digital, who graciously sponsored my travel. I work for a company that is a large multinational MSP. We do all kinds of IT management services, help desk services, global desk. We have round the sun services, all kinds of industry partnerships. Big company, does all kinds of great things, but has a really great culture. Been around forever. If you're looking for a technology partner, highly recommend them. I work for them. They treat me great. So check them out if you have any interest. And because I completely forgot to put my references on my last presentation, I blew right past the slide. I'm putting them right up front here. So here's some references that you can have. These will all be in the GitHub and such. But up front, this is a presentation I did. This first one here is a link to a YouTube video of a presentation I did for the RTP SUG that is basically a version of this presentation from about 2 years ago. So a lot of this presentation is going to be about a lot of the new stuff, but check that out for a lot of some older stuff, settings, not older, venerable settings that are still wonderful today. Here, if you want to get started, the PowerShell team has put together some great docs, just in the PowerShell repo docs like you have anywhere else. They have a great getting started. Visual Studio Code has an ISE mode where they put a lot of work into it, and the extension is like ridiculously more complicated than it needs to be just to support a lot of this stuff to make it feel like ISE as much as possible. So that's a great article for getting that and kind of replicating that to help you kind of smooth the transition away from ISE, because I don't know if you heard the news, but ISE is no longer supported. It's just there. It's great. Continue to use it, but this is the future. So if you want to take advantage of new features and be more productive and work on much larger things, VS Code is going to be the way to go. And finally, I have a thing here. I'm not going to go into it, but as far as optimizing VS Code, Adam Driscoll. Adam, are you here? I don't think he is. Adam's here. Adam runs a company called Iron Man Software. He makes an additional paid extension that adds all kinds of cool stuff, like refactors, EXEs, that kind of thing. I wanted to plug it here. He's not paying me, but it's really cool stuff. But I'm not going to cover it here because I want to keep it focused on the stuff you can get for free. But definitely check that out if you want to get even further in those weeds. And that's it. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I have here on my desktop, and that is going to be super tiny, but don't worry about it. We're going to get there eventually. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up and show you how to get, what the? See, I did it last time. I closed all my things, and and all of a sudden everybody panics. I forgot to kill all my notification stuff here. Yeah, so that's my Twitter dashboard. So let's get all that out of there. Forgot to reset. So, all right, so we're just going to go to Visual Studio Code. I'm not even my demo guy. Off to a great start. So here we go, unplugged, real solid. All right, so again, Visual Studio Code. If you want to start, here's how you start. Just Google it. There it is right up top. Click download, and you can download, install, get started, get going. I assume most of you have probably done that. Everybody installed Visual Studio Code at least once, maybe? Yeah, figured as much. But what we're going to do is we're going to do things a little bit differently. So one version of Visual Studio you can download is you can get it in a zip format. And so what that is that because Visual Studio Code is just basically a Node.js application using Electron, it doesn't have, there's nothing like administer rights about it. So while they provide you an MSI to install to the system, so it's easy for multiple users to use or images, it can run just out of a zip folder in the same way PowerShell. You can just download a zip of PowerShell and run it from a folder anywhere you are. So I have that zip here, taking that zip and unzipped it to, this is a folder that I changed the icon, the super awesome PowerShell VS Code. And when I open this up, it's just a folder, and there's our VS Code. And actually, this folder doesn't exist. I'm going to delete it because we're going to recreate it. And I'm running VS Code, so I can't do that quite yet. But let me delete that guy back out of there. So here's a default folder. So VS Code has this really cool thing called a portable mode feature, where all you got to do is you download this zip, and then you just create this folder called data. Just create a new folder, and you name it DATA data. Now that's really small, but take my word for it in the back. So when you do that, what Visual Studio Code will do is when it starts up, if it sees that folder, it will put everything about your Visual Studio instance into that folder. So I have my current Visual Studio Code that has all my optimizations and everything down here. I run insiders. But this is now a portable version of VS Code that you put on a USB drive, save as a zip and upload to OneDrive, and wherever you download it and run it, all your data is still in that folder. All your extensions, all your settings, where you've placed your windows, all your UI stuff, it's all portable in there. This is less important because the settings sync is so much better now, but this is also just good to know that you have an option, and it's really good for demos because you can have a fresh environment right here without having to do anything. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code. And I have here fresh environment, whereas my Visual Studio Code's got all my customizations. This is what you see the first time anybody opens Visual Studio Code for the first time. I'll blow this up a little bit. Let me just, before I forget, turn on screencast mode so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm just doing Control minus and Control plus. It's one of the built-in shortcuts. And if you don't believe me, the biggest shortcut you always want to know if you don't know it is if you're an old guy like me, Control Shift P. Otherwise, if you're a new person, F1, they bound that to it too. This thing is called the command palette. Who here has seen this before? Very aware of it in Visual Studio Code? Yeah, I figure because this is basically all you need to know. This is Google for VS Code. You go here and you can find everything you need to do in any command. So for instance, my zoom in and zoom out, there it is, and you can see there's the shortcut that maps to it. And so that's just, eventually you learn these shortcuts. You can change them all that stuff as you know, and such. So we have ourselves a new Visual Studio Code, and so the first thing we want to do is start getting extensions. And so we have lots of different options here. We get all kinds of good recommendations. Naturally, the first thing you're going to want to do is type PowerShell to get started. And so over here on the right, we got a good list of extensions here. And oh, great, these ones come up right away. So PowerShell, the Venerable, it's great. This is the one you're going to want. But there's another one, there's always a preview version. And at this point, the preview version is actually in a release candidate stage. So there's been this huge amount of work over about the last year, year and a half to rewrite how the internals of the PowerShell extension work to be more reliable, faster, allow for things to, like all kinds of certain IntelliSenses and stuff to work outside the main run space. So it's much more performant, much better. It's currently at a release candidate stage. Hopefully it'll come out, here pretty soon to promote stable. But at this point, I would strongly recommend right now to be running the preview version in most, I use the preview version like every single day. And the maintainers of this currently, of which I'm officially one of, but really I contribute a couple little things, learn just enough C# to be dangerous, and I help out with the issues and such like that. But they've been doing tons of great work on this. It's really available, and so I definitely recommend starting with the preview extension, using it until the new one goes stable. And then once it goes stable, it's available. And the nice thing is that one of the big things it's done is they've written a whole CI/CD pipeline to generate all the code and everything like that. So if you haven't noticed, you've probably seen the release cadence of new releases is all the time. So in fact, if I go here, I got to install it first, but I'll show that later. One other thing, if we keep going down here, there's Pro Tools, because it's pretty popular, 138K downloads for good reason. It's a great extension. And how far do I have to get to me? So here I am with my piddly 13K, the PowerShell extension pack. So what this is a collection of extensions. And literally all it is to make an extension pack in VS Code, all you do is basically take a JSON file and you put the names of the extensions in it, and then you publish it. Ta-da, you are now an extension author for VS Code. So that was my first extension. And so if I zoom, I'm going to zoom this out just so you can see a little bit better in here. But basically, an extension pack can contain all kinds of extensions. So I made this is basically sort of your quick start, that you take this and you click that install, and all 28 of these extensions will get in there and help you get started and get going. But if you don't want everything that I have, you can still sort of curate and go through. You can pick and choose that one, take that one, take that one. Nah, I don't really care about that. Take that one. I need to remove this because the bracket pair colorize is now part of VS Code, which is awesome. I'll show some of that in a minute. But basically, here's your step 2. So in 2 steps, you basically have everything that you need. Now we're going to watch this happen on the Wi-Fi. This is probably going to take forever, so we'll see how that goes. So while that's going, and we'll see how if it comes, I don't know if the pack, if it shows a status like it does the other ones for download. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. In the meantime, we're going to go through a couple different settings that you can add into VS Code that are really good for just the general editor. So one of the first ones that I like, and this kind of is like a small religious battle probably in VS Code, but one of the things I like to do is I like to take this thing, this pane on the right, and shift it to the other side. So if I can remember my shortcut for it. Is it panel right? No, it's not panel right. That's my terminal. Let's go in there. See, I already forgot my shortcut for it. I have my setting for it. In fact, let's go ahead and open that while this is going on with its install. Where did you go? Here we go. I don't know. I wrote it. I'm not sure I trust it. One of the settings in here is you can disable that. Like if it's code that you trust, you can disable that for like all your repos. Like I have my projects folder where like if anything's in my projects folder, like that's fine. Like because that's the stuff that's all like my stuff managed. But it's a good thing to have on by default because there's a lot of stuff with extensions where things can load and execute by default that maybe you don't want. Okay, now we're starting to get some extensions showing up here. So Git Lens, all kinds of stuff. We'll go through those here in a minute. Getting all these nice warnings. Yeah, I know this isn't being maintained. I don't care. So with your settings, one thing you can do with your settings that's really nice is you can define this little :PowerShell thing. And so first of all, also if you go to the general settings, yeah, sorry. It's kind of tricky. I can't use my fancy new shortcut because that's in my non-default install, but let me take this and bring that away. There we go. So move primary sidebar right. I like to have this on the right side rather than the left side. And the main reason for that is that when I do these things in collapse, my code doesn't move back and forth. Like it just keeps it in the same place. So like I'll just go ahead and move this back to the other side to show what I'm talking about. You know, like if you come from Visual Studio and that kind of thing, we're used to that, like, you know, like this doesn't bother you. But like this super bothers me. Like every time I'm going to something and I come back and my code jumps back over, I'm like, I lose my focus. If you were in my PowerShell prompt customization, I talked a lot about like my philosophy for myself is just it's all about context. I like to have things like very contextual, very focused. And so this changes my context. My eye moves. I have to figure out where I was and, you know, when I was doing something else. So but just by moving this guy simply to the right, now like when I do this kind of stuff, my code stays in the same place. So that's a good first item to do. So here's something that's new. This is new in about the last month or two. Is, again, I'm going to go to the magic Google of this. And here, there's this thing if I type, they renamed it on me. I can't remember what it's called. It used to be called side panel, but they got they still call it side panel. They call it something else now. But again, I can Google it and see if I can find it. Where are you? Is it sidebar? Is that what they call it now? Secondary sidebar. What is this about? Okay, so secondary sidebar. So now, in VS Code, you have a second area to put stuff. And you can just drag anything you want over there. So the stuff that I like to put over there is you can take like a whole category, you can take your source control, and now all your Git stuff is over on this side, and you can collapse that and reopen it as you need to. And if you want to bind, you can bind a shortcut to that, like I bind like Control-Shift/, so that I can just pop that open and close it. So what I like to have over here, I like to have my source control over here. I generally have all my file management stuff over here, but then I like to put all my like testing and navigation stuff on the other side. So you don't just have to move bitful things. Like I can take the outline here and stretch that out and put that over here. And now I have my nice kind of like, you know, like if you're a Visual Studio person, you're kind of used to having it like this. And so great, I got that. But then I can take like my testing. So for instance, I like to have I haven't done my configs here, but like if I have my configs here, like my breakpoints, I can drag my breakpoints over there. So when then I'll show a Pester test extension that I wrote so that I can have on my right side is like my file navigation, and on my left side is all my tests. So like when I'm editing my tests, working with them, I have them all available there right on the left-hand side to go through, click, run, etc. So this side panel is a really nice new feature that really helps with a lot of different kinds of development, not just PowerShell, but it's really helpful to be able to put all these items in that area. Another neat new thing you can do is, if I close that guy out, and of course this guy went big on me, split, go away. So you don't just have to have your terminal at the bottom, you can have it on the side. So if I move I think I can move my activity bar. Oh, that's an old command. Forget I did that. Where do you go? Can't remember if you can just grab this guy or not, or just kill it. So one of the things you can do now is, in addition to having your terminal, you know, left, right, or bottom, you can take any terminal that you have and tear it off and put it into your editor window. And now you have it as another editor, just like you would a tab. So this is really useful, especially if you split window. You know, rather than have it at the bottom, you can split it all kinds of different ways, however you want to have those. that you can, when you have some code and run it on the left-hand side, now you can watch it happen in real time there, but have like a long view of it so you can watch like more detailed activity that occurs there. So that's another like really handy thing to have there. I'm just going to do my reset view. And do a reload real quick. Okay, so that's sort of the layout of the different ways you can lay out with VS Code that are fairly new. So let's go into some of these extensions that have come down. So you see I got a whole bunch of extra new stuff here. And I want to talk about a couple ones in particular that are great. So the first one that I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and just open a repository I have. We'll just go ahead and go with the VS Code PowerShell extension. Actually, let's see. Do I have cones in here? I don't. How about one of my other random ones? How about secret management key pass? Let's see how that looks these days. Yes, I trust the author. I am the author. Thank you very much. And so there's all kinds of stuff you got to sign into. Oh, so one thing I forgot to start with too is who is using the settings sync in VS Code? Okay, not as many as I would think. So if you haven't ever used the settings sync, it's fantastic. It's basically a backup of all your settings. It's built into VS Code. It used to be a separate extension. Now it's built in. And all you have to do is you go in here. You choose an account to log into. You can use a GitHub account or a Microsoft account. And when you turn on settings sync, it'll go through and you just sign in and turn on, and it will synchronize all your settings out to this little storage bucket. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. You can be tied to either your GitHub account or your Microsoft account. And now everywhere you sign into your GitHub, just like you kind of have with like Microsoft Edge, all your settings, extensions, everything will come with you. So your side panel will be that. If you work in different environments, if you need to, work on like a company laptop, that kind of thing, it can synchronize all that, and more importantly, backs it up. If this computer take it, go throw it and break it in half, do I want to go through and set all these up and all these little settings and figure out where I was, or do I just want to start a new version of VS Code, sign in, and suddenly my whole environment's exactly as I remembered, all my tunes, tweaks, my custom shortcuts, etc. It syncs all these things, and you can choose what to sync. You can choose to exclude certain things you don't want to sync. Any setting, like settings that are maybe like environment specific, like a path to an executable or something, you can selectively choose not to sync that. Highly recommended. Definitely, like this is the first thing I turn on every time I do it. I'm not going to turn it on right now because it's going to flip everything over to my other environment, but you get the idea for that. So I'm here in a Git repository, and I have kind of your typical Git stuff that you're used to down here. There's an extra little button here called Git Graph. So this is an extension, Git Graph, that if you're, I'm comfortable with the Git command line tool. I've done a lot of work getting with Git checkout, that kind of thing. But there's times like when I talk about context, like just staring at that command prompt, I'm like, where am I? Like, what branch am I in? Like, how does this branch relate to what I was working on? And I'm like 12 commits deep. Did somebody else do something that doesn't tie in? How am I supposed to merge that to something else? And so there's two, you can figure that out with the Git Graph command line and the text interface and such. And there's other third-party things like Git Kraken and GitHub Desktop, which give you kind of good views. But again, context, if I can keep everything in VS Code, if I don't have to context switch to some other program to come back, I'm much more likely to stay in the zone of what I'm working on. So if I click this Git Graph, I get this really nice view of my entire repository. And I can see what branch I'm on, other branches that are going on, and the status of where everything is. So, I have my fix of secret management. We'll go and just do a new branch here. And so now there's my new branch. And if I want to go here and take something, and we're just going to take my build and say, save it. Oh, how do I know? Oh, gee, I haven't updated this to 7.2.3 yet. We'll worry about that later. Do I want to install the recommended extension for PowerShell? I'm pretty sure I already did. So we'll save that. I've got a config change. I got all this stuff that I've been changing. We'll just take this and say, here's some new stuff. And we'll leave Git Graph over here. Save it, commit. Yeah, I want a stage. I get it. I'm doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And there, in real time, it updates and shows me, okay, here's my branch. It's now updated. There's the time. That person made the change. If I had another colleague that was working and I pulled some changes, I could refresh and then see what they changed. Here's a pull request that this very nice person who I probably sat on way too long to merge left for me. And, and this is all filterable, so you can go, if you just want to see the status of an individual branch or relationship of a couple branches, again, for context, to cut down noise. Sorry, I should minimize some of this stuff so it's more visible. Really powerful. If you only want to see certain remote branches, if you only want to see what you're locally working on, like this is a really powerful extension. If you're the kind of person like me who if you're very visual and you want to see how your Git works and where you are and how things are related, this is super helpful, especially when you're doing things like rebase or other things that are going to potentially destroy things. Making sure you know where you are and what you're doing, highly useful, and one other thing too is that this is not just a view-only tool. You can right-click here and you can rename branches, you can push branches, you can check out, cherry pick, merge to a branch, you can initiate a rebase. The rebase will have a visual version so that you can make sure you can check and put the commits where you want them to be. It's tools like this that have made me so comfortable with Git that I don't worry about where my files are going and such like that. I mean, when I first started with Git, like the first time you do a Git branch and all your files disappear or something like that on your file system, you're like, oh shit, what did I do? What happened? Where did everything go? Having tools like this really brings me into my comfort zone with tools like Git, so that I don't even worry now, like when I do a new branch or I do over here, because I see what's happening and I can see what's going on. I can feel safe that my files are backed up, that if I go and make this change, I can revert it and feel safe. Really helpful in that regard. So let's move on to another extension. So one aspect, in addition to that, is a great tool called Git Lens. And so this is all specific to Git. I know I'm not really talking about PowerShell, but if you really get serious about PowerShell and you want to really have like an environment that fosters PowerShell, you treat it like any other programming language. And so you have revision control. You tie it to pipelines. You tie it to deployment systems. And Git is just a great place that when you're writing a script, if you have a large script and you make some small change and then you hit save, and then it's like, wait, what did I change? Or it's not running. I didn't realize I accidentally fat-fingered a key, or my dog came and ran over the keyboard at the same time. Git is just a great tool for that, and so that's why I'm talking a lot about Git. And so it adds all these nice things like these little statuses of hey, who put this stupid line in here? For instance, hey, I hope you find this. Hey, you did this stupid 3 minutes ago. And then you can get all the details. You can see that change, look at the details, do all kinds of fun stuff there. Really what it does is it gives you all those nice guardrails around Git, so you don't just have to work with the command line. And there's nothing wrong with the command line. It works great, but if you're in an editor, the nice thing here is having those contexts and that help there. So the next one I want to go to, again, as we talk about context, is an extension called Error Lens. So Error Lens is this great extension where if I have some code here, and for instance my build here, let's say I leave off a quote. Typically, what you see here is that you have your little problems down here. It's like, oh, okay, something's missing here. I'm missing a string terminator. Some things are kind of, not right in this code. If I put this guy back, then we're good there. We'll do a better example by dropping off a bracket here or something. Okay. So what happens is when you have Error Lens installed, you notice that not only do I have my messages down here, it lets me know right where the error is detected where my problem is. And it does it in real time. So if I'm going and I fat finger something, I immediately know, oh, wait, I messed that up. And this is huge. Another big thing about my philosophy, and it is a common development philosophy, is a thing of called shortening your development loop in terms of when you want to test something, you want to be able to get your feedback as fast as possible so you can figure out and fix it. I'll give you the best example of this. Who's ever written a GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps pipeline? Who's ever done commit hell where you're like, please work, let's try this, let's see how that works, let's see if that happens, and the time in between each time you do that is 20 minutes. That's an example of a terrible development loop because you're not getting fast feedback about what your problem is. And so this is just another way to shorten that. And so the more you can bring fast feedback into what you're doing, that helps you really be able to develop and get your stuff out quicker, be more productive in PowerShell, and just write better, cleaner code. So let's go into a couple settings here. Why are these not expanding those? Oh, it's because I deleted everything because I went to this branch. But thankfully, that's what we have Git for. And we'll just go back into this guy here and get all our stuff back. So next thing we will do is I have just kind of a list of things here. We'll go ahead and get out of KeyPass, and we'll just do a new window. And let's go ahead and open another one. We'll just go to the sandbox. Where's my sandbox? There he is. Let's just pick something at random. Let's do a power config demo for fun. I have my terminal down here. I'm ignoring my releases because I'm a bad person. And by the way, you'll notice my prompt is different. This is just something that is part of my system. If you came to my the configuring your PowerShell prompt, that's all about that. I'm not going to go into too much right now, but you'll be able to look at it there. So you'll see, like, but there's like some characters here that don't quite work. So one thing that's really nice is that there's these fonts that you can install called nerd fonts. And you can use any font, but basically these nerd fonts, what they've done is they've taken a collection of a lot of the common fonts, and they've taken all these extra symbols. So just like A, B, C, D, E, F, G are all just code points and symbols in the code. Well, there's room in Unicode for all this other symbols that usually don't get used. So what they do is they take all these different symbols from all these different icon packs and basically fill them in to where all those different symbols are. So what you have is you now have a font without using emojis that can represent all these things. Like you can have a symbol for like what a Git branch looks like. And so if you install that, then you can have different aspects of the font. So I don't think I have a good way to add the setting here, so I'll just show it from my main VS Code here. So if I bring up my terminal in here, we'll blow it up a bit. This one uses that nerd font. I use one called Delugia code, which is a version of Cascadia code, which is the default Windows terminal font. And so you see that character that before had a question mark is this nice little like rounded, I know that probably doesn't come up very well on the projector, but you can see there's this nice little like rounded icon there. And so again, it's just a nice little thing to have these things. And what it also gets you in your editor is it gets you these neat things called ligatures. So for instance, if you do not equal, notice it changed it to this kind of funky symbol. But it's still text. So like when you go to save this, it doesn't save like some crazy character. It's still not equals, but a ligature just makes it so that, hey, we're going to represent this particular combination of characters with some special kind of character. And like that's a little like weird at first, but you come to find like it's really useful because especially when you're like writing code, you start seeing these symbols that let you know like, okay, I'm trying to do this one thing as opposed to like a not equals. You just get used to seeing this symbol. And so like that, that's a better representation of, not equals versus a bang and an exclamation mark. And so as you get used to them, they're really helpful. So definitely install like a ligature-based font. Those are very helpful for having that. Or don't. Like again, that's kind of a personal preference thing, but I really like that aspect because you have all these additional symbols. And if I go into a place like, projects, and if I go to a branch, it doesn't hang up on me. If I go to VS Code, PowerShell, you'll see like that symbol right there, that's just a character like see, I'm breaking the rules. I'm not supposed to do that. This character right here, that's just a character in the font set now. So it's simply an aspect of like it's able to just represent it like an X or a Y or any other kind of character. And so you're going to can have that kind of contextual stuff and make all your prompts as well as have your code have those. So nerd fonts are great for representing that kind of information. All right, so we will go on to our next extension of the day. These are these my installed ones? These are not my installed ones. Let's go to installed. Okay, so better align. I like this one a lot. So one thing we do a lot of is work with hash tables. And what better align can do is it can take any kind of code that you have, where things are like not aligned, that kind of thing, and just very intelligently, Control-Shift-P, align, and it'll figure it out. And notice it also aligns it on the right-hand side of the brackets too. So that's great with splatting. It's great with any kind of thing where you have a lot of code lined up like that. Large JSON files. I'll take I think I have my settings JSON as an example I can show. It's a little example. I cherry-picked a few settings that I was going to go through when we have time. Yeah, so I'll get to the format document aspect, but what's nice about this is it works anywhere. It doesn't just work in PowerShell. So like if I have something like this, I can take all this stuff, Control-Shift-P align, boom, there's my JSON in a really nice aligned format. So yes, so I'll get into the formatting aspect here in just a minute. In fact, what I just aligned was all my code formatting settings. So thank you for the segue. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is that PowerShell has its own built-in code formatting. So if I go ahead and open my settings here, open settings for JSON, and we'll just take some of these settings over. And by the way, all the changes that I make, they all show up here. So that workbench sidebar location, like this is the setting that moves this thing over here. I change it over to left and hit save, immediately moves it. But I like it on, and again, there's that error lens. Let's see, like how nice is that? Like as soon as you make a screw up, hey idiot, that's not a right value, It becomes much easier than having to look down in the problems pane and figure out what's going on. So then we'll go, let's put these guys side by side. Split error right. on my normal one, so that should still be like reasonably legible. So we have all these different code formatting settings that we can do in PowerShell. So a couple of them I like. First ones that exist, which are prior to that aspect of it, is, do I have them further down? Where did they go? I think they're in the editor settings, way down here. Okay, editor. So there's a few of these that you can set that allow, because you can do the Control-Shift-P format document, but like that's kind of annoying. What if you forget? Like what if you're trying to enforce kind of a code standard? There's ways you can do this so that it just does it automatically. So you can do it so every time you paste code in, like you're pasting something in from Stack Overflow, you say, hey, when I paste some PowerShell code, just go ahead and format it for me. Like if it has aliases like % in question, expand those out to where object, that kind of a thing. So if we take those settings here, we'll copy those and bring them over into our happy land. Those are some good ones to have, great. And then, so a couple of these are just, for instance, I want to suggest some selections. I want to format on save. And what I also want to do is this nice setting of format on save modification. This is awesome if you're working in if you're doing like pull request contributions or you're working in somebody else's code base. Is like you don't want to like make 2-line change and then have the formatter reformat the entire script and now your PR is this giant, PR even though you only changed 2 lines. What that lets you do is that'll take it so that it'll just look at the lines that you modified based on the Git control and then go ahead and only format those lines. So you can still write in your shorthand, like if you want to write your pull request and you want to do, Git item, pipe % to simulate for each, and then pipe question mark to do where object. As soon as you hit save, it'll still expand out all those aliases for you, but only for that line of code. So that when you go to submit your PR, it's still nice and tight and easy to review for the poor person who has to review your PR. And so back up here again, so these are all the nice formatting settings that exist for that. You have, you can align property value pairs. That's the one that I showed, that's the align version that's built into PowerShell, where if you turn that on, then when you build a hash table and you format the document and you paste it, or when you hit save, if you have format on save, it'll go through and make that look all really nice as opposed to being like all misaligned with equal signs and such. Autocorrect aliases, very good one if you work in just kind of like a general, if you work in a team. I love this one because I love to write in the shorthand, like write out, all my, I'll do things like just do like, like SSE for select string. I'll do all the little shorthand aliases. I have a ton of aliases in my profile. So I can write a lot of people complain like PowerShell's so verbose, I got to do all this typing. It doesn't have to be. You can make all kinds of little aliases and write as fast as you want and write as pithy as you want for all kinds of environments. And you can use a question mark instead of writing out where object. You can use a % sign instead of writing out for each object. But the nice thing about that is like I can write that, but I send that to somebody and it looks like a bunch of code golf junk. So if you enable the autocorrect aliases, I can write that. In fact, I'll go ahead and we'll take these settings and bring them over. And let's just show what that looks like, hopefully. Didn't set my default language to PowerShell, so we'll do that. Do I have my ISE? He's running good, great. So, Git content, where name is this, for each, hi. So it's giving me all these warnings, it's like, okay, this is an alias, you probably shouldn't do that. I'm gonna go ahead and format it. Oh, I haven't saved it to a document yet, desktop. Super rad demo that will definitely work. I believe in positive affirmation. And it doesn't want to work, so that's the way it is. I probably don't have, I got my settings in there, right? Is this the right one? It's there to do. Save. Here's what we're going to do. It's like the oven. Let's go back to my one that I know works. Do my new PowerShell, and we'll do git gc name eq. Actually, even better. I got a better way to do this. Just take this guy. IC's up. Or that. See if we can get our copy paste to work. So we'll copy that. Paste it. Oh, didn't recognize it. It was wrong window. Try again. There we go. Ta-da! First try, every try. So that was an example of the paste on format. So again, I have all these aliases in there, but as soon as I paste, formats it all, expands everything out, don't have to worry about it.
What extension is that?
That's built into the PowerShell extension. So that's just simply a matter of setting these settings. So I probably should, again, I'm not trying not to go too much on just like the super basics, but if you go into the, if you open just your normal settings, like we'll do like the settings JSON, any one of these, if you start typing and you do PowerShell, you start getting all the different settings that you can tune and tweak. And there's a GUI for this too. If you hit this little flip button, okay, here we go. Now we can go to extensions. We can go down here to PowerShell, and all these things that you can figure. Like, how do you want your braces? Do you want your braces on the same line? Do you want them on a new line? Do you want to pretend like you're a C# developer? You can lay out however you want whatever your code format is. And the nice thing is, like, a lot of these settings you can actually put into a file inside your repo. It's called a workspace setting, and then that'll enforce it for everybody in your team, so that when you go to format document, if they're writing it and they put the brace on the new line, when they hit format on save, it'll just move that brace to a new line that matches your code standard. It's a good sort of like first gate. You really should be using like a GitHub action that does like script analyzer to fix that stuff. But it's kind of a nice like initial thing, especially for like PRs. Like if you're trying to enforce a certain kind of code standard, it's a nice sort of like not like strictly enforced, but easy way to kind of like just get everybody on the team like, hey, use these settings or just use the workspace settings, and there we go. How are we doing? We got some good time here. All right, so we have, so that formatting is really useful, and again, unless you write chicken scratch like I usually write, but then in the end result get like a nice full blown out setup. Okay, back to our terribly working, non-working that I don't know why that is, but we can probably figure it out. I probably just missed some setting somewhere to enable. You know what I probably did is I probably just didn't enable code formatting or something, but I got two windows now, don't I? Yeah. Okay, so let's close that out. Don't need to see that. So some other kind of settings that are really helpful. One thing I want to show, which a lot of people don't know you can do, is who just use like launch configurations for debugging? You get the little debugging on the right. So one thing that a lot of people don't know you can do is there's this new special thing you can put in the settings where you can have this launch heading. And you can define debug settings that are for your VS Code instance, not for everything. So if you define this, like I'll have this all available in the GitHub, but you can define this and you have PS interactive, run like I like them, be able to run with arguments, run my Pester tests, do an attach, all that kind of stuff. Rather than usually if you're doing PowerShell things, you probably know every time you do a new project, you got to go click and make that new launch JSON, all that kind of stuff. This is a way to have them globally. So if I go back to my, again, one I know works, as long as I'm in any repo, which I'm not apparently, let's just go open something random. We'll see what's in our good project that I have. Let's go with, let's go with Mortar. I haven't touched Mortar in a while. So here I am in a PowerShell thing. Like it has some config, but it doesn't have a .vs code in here, But if I go to my run and debug, hey, look, I've got all my run and debug tasks available, even though I haven't defined any in the workspace, because you can now define them in your user settings. And so you can have your kind of typical ones that you use. This is great for, again, great for PRs. Like if you're working in somebody else's environment or you're working on an open source project, they might have defined tasks that like, maybe aren't your speed, maybe aren't your tempo. And you just want to have your typical PS interactive that you like, that you run and you do things and you do you set your error action to break. And I go, oh no. And then there's my debug. But see, it ran the debug, and I didn't have to make a task JSON for that. I didn't have to make a launch JSON. It's built in. So all you got to do is simply you basically just use that launch keyword, and then you just define them the same way as you would in a launch JSON. So super helpful, really handy to be able to have just all your typical PowerShell things that you do, but it's tied to your profile. And again, with settings sync, now that floats to any VS Code you use. If you go out to run it in code spaces, if you do it in a dev container, you've got them there. Okay, what else do we want to go here? I like this setting. This is kind of a nice one. This is a fairly new one. You can now set a limit in tabs so that if you take this and will you go ahead and throw that in here? So now if I go and I just keep creating tabs here, it'll max out on the number of tabs that show. Because I have a real bad problem. Like I'm a real bad problem of not closing tabs. So I'll get done with a VS Code session. I'll have like 15 tabs in my VS Code. I'm like, oh, what do we need to close? So what this does is this basically handles it for me. It's just whatever the most recent things that I've done, it just keeps those. And it works with opening files in the browser too. So if you click here, you notice it never goes above 3 or 4 files. It's just kind of keeping it here. And if I do a new thing, it'll just go ahead and just keep rolling it forward. So that old one dropped off, and now I got that there. So real easy way to like help yourself stay organized again, help remove some of the clutter. A nice new feature in VS Code. All right, we're at 5 minutes, so I promised I'd show VS Code pets. We'll do that. Pets for your VS Code. We will install him, and there he is, our happy little boy. This is absolutely the most productive thing you can do with your VS Code. Like you will, you have to understand, because you have to understand, like programming is as much about mental health as it is productivity and physical health. So sometimes you just need a little companion to help out. And if I go ahead and, where's my pet? Reset, send additional pets to a farm. Spawn me a pet. And like, oh, look at my little kitty. He's there. He's gonna go around. Oh, he swiped. Oh, he doesn't like my mouse. Oh, he's so cute. You come. Here you go, buddy. Yeah, how you doing? You're good. All right, I'm bored with you. Spawn an additional pet. Who do I want? Cat. Really? Here we go. We gotta save that to the end. How about a better version of Clippy? Zappy. Oh, there he is. Oh, he's cold. He's getting a cold start. He's freezing up. So yeah, this is like a goofy extension, but to show the power of extensions. You can have anything to like run a VS Code pet, anything like that. And there he goes back and forth, doing his thing. So then, of course, all right, by popular demand, we'll spawn Clippy. But even better, what color Clippy? Obviously yellow. Oh, and now they're starting to make friends. And they're all hanging out. Man, we are good. Let's see, wait, when was that project deadline? Doesn't matter. We got. Hey, look, there he is. Check out his hat. Oh, he loves me. Oh, Clippy's so sweet. You know what? I just want to have you around forever. Hey, I got that cool new sidebar. You know, let's go ahead and take you. And I can't throw him there, but I can bring him over here. That's good. I got you there. I want you maybe have you as a little pal. Sneaking his way. So clearly the most productive extension you can have in VS Code. Get him. That's just the rest. This is what I need 90 minutes for, is just let that run. Like that's easy content right there.
You know how many projects you just added time to?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, continuing the in joke from my, I'm never going to, it's going to take me 3 months to remember. Like, fine, I'll fix it. If you're at my PowerShell prompt customization, that's a continuation of an inside joke. Okay, I think one more thing. Let's see, I got 2 minutes. I could probably real quickly, like, who's here seen my Pester test extension at all? That's pretty good. So this is a little thing that I made a project that I just kind of wanted to get into. We'll just go back to kind of my main run space here, zoom this out. Let's see, go ahead and open it. What's a project that I've used it recently on? Let's see, how about, might work with press. We'll just try KeyPass. It might still work. Probably not, but we'll find out. So I open my side panel here. I'm in the wrong VS Code, that's why. Let's try Mortar, side panel. I don't think Mortar has any tests, but yeah, it doesn't have any tests. Bad example. So I made an extension that basically lets you, again, that whole thing of context and lowering your development cycle, being able to have them just right here in your console to be able to run your Pester tests with. I just can't remember what's here. Let's do date modified. Maybe that'll help me out to find something that I worked on recently. That does not help me. Test job, that's a good one. Does he have tests? He does not have tests. Fine. How about Exchange REST? That's got a couple, I think. All my various projects. PowerShell Maps got some tests. I think it'll work for there. Let's find out. Side panel, make sure that comes up, and have my Pester test extension running. Did it move on me? It was a great demo end. Just bang a whimper. Well, here's how we do this. Check this out. There's this website. I don't know the URLs for my own stuff, so. Oh, there it was. I saw it. There we go. So I made this extension that what it lets you do is all your Pester tests will show up on the right-hand side over here, or wherever you want to. You can move this wherever you want. So your whole Pester test hierarchy shows up here in VS Code. And when you run it, it does it in a high-performance, real-time way. You can run it, and you get to watch your test go and step through. And if you have issues with it, it integrates directly with the new VS Code testing API they added. So for instance, if you had an exception, you get this nice little pop-up. that up. You get this nice little pop-up that shows hey, an exception, this is what you were expecting, but this is what actually happened. And so it completely integrates with your Pester test. Really great way to get started with Pester. Every time you save, it can run your Pester test. Again, great way to shorten that development loop rather than having to run and invoke Pester over and over again. So I hope that was helpful. I know the goal of this was just go till we ran out. There's tons more tips. I'm going to have all those out on the GitHub, all my configs that I didn't get to, and little notes, and then there's those video presentations. So thanks very much.